Hey everybody, how's it going? I am KGB313, and today's video is going to be talking a little bit about the game of Monopoly. The reason for that is I've had an article that has hit my Facebook feed several times talking about the strategy that always wins in Monopoly, when it's actually about a tactic known as the Elfer technique. So let's get into this. We're going to talk about what the Elfer technique is. We're going to talk about why it is not ideal, and we're going to give you a better strategy that you can use to win at Monopoly. The game we're using to illustrate this is Monopoly Plus by Ubisoft. It is available on Steam for about 20 bucks. Great version of the game. So the Elfer technique is essentially about hoarding houses to prevent other people from upgrading. You need 4 houses on a property before you can upgrade to a hotel, and there's only 32 houses in the game. So what that means is if you build your property up to 4 houses and stop there, you control enough houses to potentially prevent anybody else from building. This is a decent tactic to use when you have several property groups built up and you have somebody is trying, just completed a new one and wants to build it up and knock you out of the game. It's a good way to block that. However, you can't treat this as a strategy. It is a tactic. And that is because to even block a hotel from being built, you need control over 25 houses. In order to have control of 25 houses, you need 3 property groups completed. For most people, if they have monopolies on 3 property groups and they have the money to build them up, they are already well on the way to winning, because it means you have monopolies on nearly half the board. So, what are we going to do instead? Well, my strategy relies on 4 points, 4 priorities. The first priority is to reduce your risk exposure. What that means is you want to limit the amount of rent you might have to pay. Similar to the idea behind the Elfer technique. But instead of doing it by hoarding houses, what we are going to do is we are going to block monopolies from ever happening. We do this by obtaining 1 property from each color group. By having 8 spaces, just 8 properties on the board, you can prevent anyone other than yourself from having a monopoly. That's powerful. In doing so, it means you'll never have to pay more than the base rent. So the highest one you'll have to pay is Boardwalk at 50 bucks, or if you own Boardwalk, Park Place at 35. That makes it a lot easier to get around the board when you don't have to pay that much. Now, along with this, you do also need to get into the railroads, because if somebody has all 4, that's 200 bucks, and that can be doubled by a chance card. Every time you buy a railroad, you cut that exposure in half. So you need to do that. Likewise with the utilities. If somebody owns them both, that's 10 times. That's up to 120 bucks. If you own one, it's only 48 bucks at a maximum. So that's why getting into each of these is important. Obviously, the more of these you can obtain, if you own them all, that's ideal. So, I suppose it probably hasn't taken long to figure out that you're not going to be the first person to land on each color group. Chances are people are going to buy something that you need. And that means you are going to have to wheel and deal. You're going to have to make trades. So in order to do that effectively, you need to leverage your assets. What we mean by that is You have to be willing to trade if you have multiple properties in a color group. You also have to be willing to mortgage those properties to keep your cash reserves high enough to where you can buy property. Now, if you need to do a trade, you may need to overpay for a property, and that's okay. If you need to do that to get the property, that's what you got to do. It's more important when I buy North Carolina Avenue to block this color group from being completed than it is for me to get $26 in rent. So when I pay my $300 to buy this property, one of the best things I can do is pull $150 out of it in order to acquire more property. Early in the game, being able to obtain property is more important than this rent. So, you're going to reduce your risk exposure, leverage your assets to do so, and once you have your one property from each color group, you have the other monopolies blocked. Nobody can get one but you. You have a monopoly on monopolies now. So now you need to obtain and build your own. Now, I have found more often than not, you're going to need to make a deal to get into one of these. Sometimes you'll land on one naturally, and that's great. Usually you're going to have to deal for it. The ideal group is the orange group because of the way jail works. You got to roll doubles. Double 3 will put you on St. James. Double 4 will put you on Tennessee. If you get a double 6, land on chance, you might get a back 3 space that'll put you on to New York. So that's 3 possible spots you can get a big chunk of rent out of people if you build it up. But good players know this. They know that is a valuable property, so they're not going to part with it willingly. On the other hand, I have found that the brown properties are usually much easier to obtain. They don't have the same level of knockout power, but they really can undercut other players. If you think about it, let's say I own Baltic, you own Mediterranean. You spent $60 on a property. It's only generating $2 in rent in the rare occasion somebody lands on it. And the mortgage is only $30. If I approach you offering $150 for that property, that may look pretty attractive. And that is the sort of reason why people will part with these properties more willingly, because they're not afraid of the rent amount on that. But they're only $50 for a house. So $500 will get you a hotel, and a hotel on Baltic will net you $450 in rent. Pays for all the buildings almost by itself. So, once you have obtained and built a monopoly, whether it's the brown, whether it's the orange, whether it's any of them, once you have a monopoly built up, then at that point we are into the end game. And I want you to understand, stage 3 is where most players will see the writing on the wall and they will quit. They can't get a monopoly, you have one, game's over. However, if you have to play it out, at this point, now you need to build your cash reserves and make the next deal. Your next step here is to pay off your mortgages for the end game. You want money coming in from every possible source. You're going to build your cash reserves up, and you're going to use your monopoly to knock the wind out of people until you can make a big enough offer to somebody desperate enough to give you what you want. And at that point, it starts to snowball. You get a knockout blow, you knock somebody out of the game, you get their properties, and then you can knock more people out, and so on and so forth. At that point, you've already won. It's just a matter of getting people to give you what you want. Now, bad players and AI will simply let you overpay because they treat the value of the properties like they're static. But the secret to Monopoly is understanding the value of the properties. They're dynamic. They change throughout the course of the game. So in our example of Mediterranean Avenue, all the other Monopolies are blocked. This is worth a heck of a lot more than $60. It's worth more than 150. So it's just a matter of what somebody will take for it. Once you have your cash reserves built up, you can, start going after the railroad. You can start going after this, the knockout type properties. When it comes to real people, like I said, knock the wind out of them and then make them a big offer. Eventually they'll bite. On the AI, the thing about the AI is that if you do double or triple the purchase price of a property, they are almost always going to give it to you, even if it's completely against their best interest. They will take it because they look at the dollar value of the property as being static. So that being said, one word of caution I have to give you on this: if you play with the same players frequently, you can experience some fallout from this, which is people will stop trading with you in future games. If you reach a point where nobody will trade with you, at that point you're completely depending on the roll of the dice to get you the properties you need. At that point, you may as well just call it. Move on to another game, suggest another game, because at that point it's purely a game of chance for you. That's not what you want. You want this to be a game of skill, not a game of chance. In the event, like, I've even had people get angry enough that they've teamed up to try to beat me, and at that point you need to just move on. You're no longer really playing the game. It's just a matter of them trying to spite you at that point. So just be aware that that can happen. In the meantime, that is the strategy. It works very, very well for me. You'll pretty much be able to beat any AI that you face if you employ this strategy correctly, and you'll do very well against human players. How about you guys? Do you have any techniques or any tactics that you like to use in the game of Monopoly? If you do, let me know down in the comments. And if you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you would either hit the like, the subscribe button, or both. And if you're interested, you can also find me on Twitch at twitch.tv/KGB313, or on Twitter at KGB313_Twitch. So I hope you enjoyed the video and that you will come and see us next time. Thanks.